Man, I'm telling you, how to know when to stop reverse dieting, or more specifically, how many calories you should get to, is a question I've been getting a lot lately. So I thought this would be a good time to cover this topic, but unfortunately it's also one of the more difficult questions to answer, and this is because there's just so many variables that are unique to each individual. But I'm gonna do my best to give you some signs you can look for to know when enough is enough. So when it comes to how many calories you should get to, unfortunately, this is not really something that we can do just based on math. I mean, sure, it's not uncommon to use some sort of equation like a Mueller equation and say, okay, once you've gotten to roughly what your maintenance calories should be, then you can go with that. And another one I've heard and even used in the past myself is make sure you get to at least 13 to 15 times your body weight in calories, preferably even more. The problem is genetics play a large factor, and for many people, these equations just won't make sense. I've seen some people be able to get well beyond even 20 times their body weight, and other people who can't even get to 12 times without gaining far too much fat. Plus, in my opinion, these equations are more for people who aren't overweight to begin with. So the more overweight you are, the less accurate these are generally going to become. So with that said, what should you look for? Well, make sure you stick around to the end of the video because I have a lot of different factors you need to keep in mind, starting with one of the bigger signs, and that is how your hunger signals are doing. If you find that you're still always hungry, constantly obsessed with food, or feel like there could just never be enough calories, you're definitely nowhere near ready to be done with your reverse diet. In fact, one of the best signals you're in a better place metabolically is that you're not only not as hungry, but you might even find that you're overly full and having a hard time getting your calories in. This is largely because your hormones, ghrelin and leptin, have now finally returned back to normal after being out of whack from the constant dieting. See, ghrelin is nicknamed the hunger hormone, and that's because as that hormone increases, it signals to your body that you're more hungry, and as you diet and lose more fat, your leptin drops, and leptin signals to your body when you're full. So you have one hormone telling you that you're always hungry, you have another hormone telling you that you're never full. So you can see why it can be really easy to overeat post-diet and why so many people struggle with body fat overshooting. And honestly, sometimes it's not even about the number of calories you're eating, but more so your body just needs enough time out of a calorie deficit for these hormones to stabilize. I remember 2 cuts ago when I had gotten my calories up over 3,200, my carbs were over 400, and these are the highest numbers I've ever been on. And I was even in a surplus because this was a building phase, and yet for a while I was still really hungry eating these calories, even though it had been a few months since I stopped my diet. But then I remember all of a sudden 1 week I was like, holy crap, I'm having a hard time eating this much food, even though I was eating the exact same macros and being consistent as I was before. The difference? My hormones had finally got back to pre-diet levels, and this, my friend, takes time. Now, just because you stop being hungry doesn't necessarily mean you're ready to jump back into a cut again, but it's certainly a good sign. And as a side note about feeling full while in a reverse diet, this isn't an uncommon thing, so I thought it was worth talking about here because a lot of time people will start struggling to get all their calories in when they get higher because they feel so full, and the reason this happens is because they're eating all the same foods they were before in their dieting phase, and these foods are really hard to digest and very filling, which is why they're great foods for a cut. But as calories get higher, if you just start adding in more filling foods, things like cruciferous vegetables and stuff like that, it's gonna be hard to get calories up without feeling stuffed. So in this case, you might have to start eating more foods that aren't so filling, and this doesn't mean you have to go out and eat a bunch of donuts and ice cream, though you can certainly include them as long as you're meeting your numbers. But even if you don't want to eat any of those foods, you can still just make some substitutions, like instead of brown rice, eat white rice. Instead of whole wheat pasta, you have regular pasta, things like that. Because if you're eating nothing but hard to digest foods, you're probably just going to lead to feeling really gassy and bloated and pretty miserable. Understand that as long as you're still eating the same amount of micronutrients you were before, you're still getting that. So it's not like having something that's not healthy is going to make you unhealthy now. It's all about the context of your overall diet. Okay, another thing to look for as a sign is you're just overall feeling better, have more energy, you're recovering from your training better, and things like that. Again, a lot of this is hormonal, and signs your body is recovering from the stress you put it under when you were dieting. Because dieting is exactly that. It is a stress on the body. You are activating your body's self-defense mechanism against starvation. So if you're still feeling run down, moody, struggling through your training, etc., your body needs more time and probably more calories to recover. And bringing you to the next sign that your metabolism is probably back in a better place is you just can't keep increasing calories without gaining unnecessary weight. This is because at a certain point, you're going to hit your genetic potential and you won't be able to keep increasing without that turning into a pretty big surplus. So if you find yourself in this position and you are gaining more weight than you want and your calories are nice and high, from there, if you want to maintain, you can just drop your calories back by maybe 5 to 10% and you can hold there. So it's not necessarily about continuing to get calories up forever. It's about getting them into a place that seems like a good amount of food for you and then holding them. And this is where so many people go wrong. A lot of people just increase their calories. As soon as they get to a certain calorie amount, they stop and they immediately drop their calories again, and their body just has not had enough time to adapt to these things, and their body doesn't respond, or if it does, it barely responds. And this is because your body needs time to adapt to these higher calories. So hold these higher calories for as long as you can. Remember, you cannot do this for too long, but you can definitely do it for not long enough. And the worst part is, if you try to do it too fast and your body doesn't respond and you don't get out really fast, basically what you've done is undid all your hard work. All that time you put into your reversing is now gone and you have to start over. Don't do what so many people do and constantly sacrifice your long-term goals for short-term gratification. Honestly, a good rule of thumb here is, if you're not sure if it's been long enough, it probably hasn't been. How long do you have to wait? Well, don't go anywhere, because I'm going to show you at the end of this video how to figure that out. Okay, now a lesser thought of variable when it comes to knowing when to stop your reverse diet is what your personal life is looking like, both now and in the upcoming months. Don't get me wrong, there's always going to be challenges, and a cut is never going to be something that's going to be easy. But if you're in a position where life is just crazy, stress is super high, your schedule is jam-packed, and your time and energy is going to be taken up as it is, adding a calorie deficit, needing to structure your food more, adding more cardio in is not going to make it better. And since the longer you reverse diet, the better off you'll be metabolically when it's time to cut. If you're in a position where it's going to be more realistic to be able to stick to the plan better in a few months, you're much better off waiting, as you'll be able to stick to the plan better, and your metabolism will be better too. For instance, for most of my clients, I try to steer them away from trying to cut through the holiday season. Not that they can't, some people don't care and they can go through it and be just fine, but for a lot of people, that's a very difficult time to diet. And it's like, why not just use that time, get your calories nice and high and into a good place, use it to be able to enjoy extra food during a time that's difficult to diet anyway. And then when that finally passes, you're gonna be in a fantastic place and you're set up for success. In fact, if you've been thinking about starting a reverse but you haven't, if you're watching this video as it's being released in June, this is a really good time to start a reverse, because if you do that through the end of the year, through the holiday season, that's gonna give you a good 6-7 months of reversing to help put you in a better spot. And then by the time the holiday season does come, your calories are gonna be sky high and you can really enjoy things. All right. One thing I've talked about before is, while the more calories you can get, the better off you will be, it's not necessarily about getting your calories super high and getting every last one you can, and more of the benefit comes from being out of a deficit for a longer period of time. But just because you don't necessarily have to get them super high, which there is still benefit, you do still need to at least have room to make adjustments when it's time to cut, as well as adjust more when you hit plateaus. So I often recommend dropping your calories around 400 to 600 when you start your cut, or especially if you have a lot of weight to lose, a better option might be to drop around 20 to 30% of your calories. But here's the thing, if you're too afraid of gaining weight during your reverse and you barely get your calories up that much, once it's time to cut, if you make that adjustment and you're already gonna be super low calorie, you're gonna have a hard time going through a successful cut. And then you always have to keep in mind that your metabolism will adapt. So whatever you do to start, you're going to have to make adjustments when this happens. So you need to have wiggle room in your calories and your cardio to be able to make adjustments and see the success you're after. Always remember that weight gain during the reverse is temporary and it's for the greater good to see the long-term result. Okay, one thing I haven't covered yet in specific detail, which I told you I would, is exactly how long you should reverse diet as well as how long you should hold those higher calories. But the reason for that is I already have a video that covers this in really good detail, so make sure you check out this top video and I'll cover exactly how to do this, whether you're just coming from a cut or trying to fix your metabolism from a long history of yo-yo dieting. So make sure you check that out next, and I'll see you over there.